As a result, the history of the Jewish people soon came to be defined by the carousel of foreign empires that took turns conquering and subsequently ruling the ancestral Hebrew homeland. First came the Assyrians, then the Babylonians, then the Persians, who ruled the Jews with a reasonably fair and light hand. Finally, in 332 BC, the Macedonian phalanxes of Alexander would steamroll the Achaemenid Empire out of existence, establishing Classical Greek as the dominant language and culture of the Near East. It is here that the Jewish people became subjects of the Greek world. When Alexander died, his massive Macedonian empire fractured into several monarchies, ruled by his closest comrades and later their descendants.
All praises to Yahawah, bahasham, Yahawashi, bahasham, Racha Kodash. Double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone that rule well, and they bring the word and doctrine. And shalom, meaning peace, may that be into the elect of the nation of Israel. Now you saw it there, and that video is interesting. Where it's not, there's leaven in it, there's certain points. And of course our perspective is going to be completely different. But it's interesting nonetheless if you're able and willing to chew the meat, split the bones. But anyway, Daniel 7 is basically, it's broken down by the guy in the video. And he was saying that Israel and Judah have been defined by the different nations that conquered them. And that made me think, well, the Gentiles, right, we became Gentiles. And well, especially under Hellenization, that's why you have either Jew or Greek, as we've gone into the Hellenist days, Hellenist, Hellene, all of it. But specifically, we've been conquered by this nation and that nation and become as them. Now, not to the highest degree up until Hellenization, and then Rome, it was still prevalent in Rome, and today it is under another form. And it wasn't until this mystery Babylon, right, this 11th horn, that's when we began to see an incredible amount of expansion, right, even greater than Alexander's, which was swift, with that leopard there. But let's get into this. Daniel 7 and verse 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn. Right, and the horns in question are the 10 horns. As we also read in Revelation 13:1. And I stood upon the summit of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Right, and that represents the Rome thereof. Right, because you have Rome, then you have the revival of Rome. Because the precursor to the EU, I believe it was the League of Nations, had a treaty when they were in talks of setting it up, and it was called the Treaty of Rome. So that it was called the EEC, if I'm not mistaken, the European Economic Committee, or something like that. You can look it up. But that's even more evidence against that, and it was broken down as this kingdom and that kingdom and this kingdom and that kingdom. That comes straight from the book of Daniel. Right, so you had the 7 heads, NATO, today, and the 10 horns, the EU. That's in the revival sense. Now Daniel 7:8 again. Now we know there's 10 horns, so let's see this another little horn. I considered Daniel 7 and 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. Well, who were the 3? You had the Brits, and dealing with the English. You had the Spanish, which also goes into the Portuguese on the Iberian Peninsula, and you had the Franks, the French. They were the main involvement prior to this 11th horn. says, and behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of Salaki. In this horn were eyes like the eyes of man, and a mouth speaking great things. Also goes into that mouth more stout than his fellow. If I can find that. There it is. Look, Salaki. Right, Daniel 7 and 20. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. Right, and stout goes into what? Forget the Hebrew word there. Again, it's all painting that picture. The same eagle, they had that in ancient Rome. What's the word I'm looking for? Stout. Stout, rab, or rabar. Right, great figure of power, figuratively of power, noun, captain, chief. So who's the chief? Who's the head? Who's the top of all this? It's that whore. Right, the whore's on top. She's the exalted. Right, and exalts herself as the eagle. It's the book of this. The book of Revelation 17 and 4. And the woman, right, the woman is about to tell you who the woman is. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet colour, and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand, full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Right, and going back to that what was mentioned on the video, the ancient Babylon. So this mystery Babylon has elements, going back to the Hellenization Greek religion. What was that? It was it was Edomized, Kemet, Egyptian philosophy, and Babylonian. So now mystery Babylonian is that ancient Greek, which came from there, ancient Roman, which came from the Greek, and a little bit of this new thing, all mixed in. All of that is her wine. Right, verse 5. And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. So the mother, again, that is the chief, right? The mother of the harlots. It's not just one of these little ones, it's the top harlot. Right, so that's that same stout kingdom of Daniel. So even when you go into the history, speaking about Rome, yeah, it fell, but it was wounded. It came straight back up, and it came even bigger than it was back then. And Babylon has been bigger than the apex of Rome. And more land covered, more influence had, the internet. And you didn't have the internet, and an access point for Babylonian culture in every place you could go. And of course that's an exaggeration, but it is heavy. Right, just like it says, the known world in that time was taxed. It's called it the world, but we know those places that Rome didn't tax. And sometimes it speaks, like in Deuteronomy 28, you'll be cursed forever. But it's not a literal forever. You just got to understand how Jake speaks. Luke 2 and 1. It came to pass in those days, there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. Right, but it wasn't the whole earth. But in this time, a mystery Babylon has exceeded that. So it's going to be a heavy judgment. Right, so Jake was in all nations, oppressed by all nations. And let's get that in Maccabees. This is 1 Maccabees 2 and 10. What nation hath not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? Right, that's talking about Jerusalem. Right, the her there. That's the holy woman. Right, the mother of us all, as it's written. Whereof on the left hand side you have Babylon. They're the mother of harlots. So there's always that just balance. Just like you had Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau. And they were the same spirits. And so there's always and even the seed. Let's just put it. Genesis 3:15. And I'll put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed, and it shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. So even before Cain and Abel, he always had that. It's always been set up like that. Going back into this, 1 Maccabees 2:10. What nation hath not had a part in her kingdom and gotten of her spoils? So what nation historically didn't oppress those of Jerusalem? I didn't have a byword specifically in every single language. And again, I'm being verbose. We're in many a language. We're in all nationalities, nation groups according to the scriptures. I've had Jake in a poor place. This is Jeremiah 30, verse 16. Therefore all they that devour thee shall be devoured, and all thine adversaries, every one of them, shall go into captivity, and they that spoil thee shall be a spoil, and all they that prey upon thee will I give for a prey. I read that and gotten of her spoils. And we were the spoils. In the transatlantic slave trade, we were the spoils. When all of the northern tribes were being destroyed, genocided, and put on alcohol, and all the various curses, we were spoils. And when they had us all under thumb, we were spoils. So let's get into this word, Jeremiah 13:16. The word for spoil. So them that spoil as a verb is sha'as, and plunder, spoil, one's plundering. What's spoil, it says used once. It was used once. A spoil is a noun. Mashasa. Booty, spoil, plunder. Spoil 4 times, booty 4 times. Sorry, 2 times. It says it comes from shasas, which says to plunder, spoil, to plunder, to be plundered, to be rifled. Spoil 4 times, rifle once. Right, that happened to Jake. So, even in the so-called New Testament, this is written about. Right, Revelation 2 and 26 through 27. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations. Right, but not on the left-hand side, not in wickedness, but according to the decree of the Heavenly Father, which has to be innately righteous. And he that overcometh and keepeth my works unto the end, to him will I give power over the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, as the vessels of a potter shall they be broken to shivers, even as I received of my Father. Right, you can read about that in Psalm, the 2nd chapter. So I'll leave it there. And it's interesting to get into the history, but it always comes back to prophecy. Because the things written aforetime were written for our learning. And we'll get this, we'll read it because we're already in the book. Right, here it is, Revelation 19:13. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Yahawah, bahasham, Yahawashi. Right, and who is that talking about? Verse 10. And I fell at his feet to worship him. And he said unto me, See thou do it not, I am thy fellow servant, and of thy brethren that have the testimony of Yahawashi. Worship Yahawah, for the testimony of Yahawashi is the spirit of prophecy. And he's known as his word, so the things written aforetime in the history may help us understand the mystery. and the things to come. Alright, so I pray it was edifying. Shalom.